A good conveyancer, it's almost kind of like you guys are really you're not appreciated, I feel, in the industry, and I mean this with all due respect. It's almost like when you're in like a bar. I don't really go out anymore, but if the DJ makes a mistake, everyone knows about it, right? But if they're doing their job, the music's just kind of going, and you're just kind of enjoying things. And I feel like conveyancing is almost a little bit similar. If there's a mistake that happens, everyone knows about it, and you point the finger straight away. But when things are actually going really well, it just kind of ticks along in the background. But it kind of leads me to the question that a lot of the time conveyancers can actually move things along faster, can actually really help the deal. What are some questions that people need to start asking their conveyancers and start really jumping into to actually pull them more into the front seat and actually utilize the skill set that really isn't spoken about as much or seen as much?
Yeah, so things that I tell investors or anyone in a property journey is to get us involved with the rest of your team early on. Because obviously we're there to not only protect you and sort of safeguard you and check the contract and the leases and all that sort of stuff, but we can work with your strategy. So we could, help negotiate finance clauses or longer cooling off periods or due diligence clauses or longer settlements if you need to pull money, from other places, or rent back clauses and, all those sorts of things that can help align with your strategy. And so, and are really important, which sometimes people don't think about. Most people just think real estate agent, mortgage broker, and they don't think about us too much. We're more seeing a lot of the times of like we're just filling in paperwork and ticking boxes, and people have actually said that to me in the past, and it's really not that. It's a lot more involved than that. But get us involved early with the rest of your team, like your accountant, your buyer's agent, your mortgage broker, because a good team around you is going to be able to help you get to where you want to go.
What's a clause that sometimes you find, whether it's developers or just anyone really tries to put out, I'd imagine it'd be more so developers, trying to put into a contract that actually has no kind of legal precedence? Like, because technically you can chuck anything in the contract that you want, but it doesn't mean that it's legally binding. Is there something that you see that sometimes people just try and sneak in there, but it's like, nah. What comes to mind?
All the time. So sometimes with like off the plan, for instance, again, because they got so many clauses in theirs, they'll have things like if we don't reach the sunset date, either the purchaser or the vendor can rescind the contract, meaning like bring the contract to an end and give the deposit back. But for instance, like in New South Wales contracts, the vendor can't rescind anymore. There's been updates to off the plan legislation. I believe it was 2015, where they changed it to say that no, once the sunset date is reached, if they haven't registered by then, the buyer can pull out, no problem. But the vendor can only pull out if either the buyer agrees or with a court order. But yet they still try and put these clauses in. And now they've even tried to go around that and put other clauses not around the sunset. They say, if we don't get funding or the development's no longer viable, the vendor is allowed to rescind the contract. So essentially, it's like the vendor can just rescind for any reason, or if there's delays with the sunset, they say, the vendor can delay the sunset, for any reason they like, and their project manager will be the, who determines that. So there's always, all like release of deposit clauses that they put in there, which is a big no-no, especially in developments. People try and put those in. They try and put like settlements at 14 days. And for instance, if that state's mandated to 21, it's like, you can't be doing that. So there's always clauses that people are trying to put in that contravene legislation or regulations, and they still try. Because the reality is that you might have a legal right as a buyer to certain protections or certain legislation or whatever it may be, but enforcing those rights are another thing altogether. And so developers know that the everyday buyer is not going to take them to the Supreme Court and fork out $100,000, for those few visits. So they use that quite a bit. So there's always clauses in contracts, especially, higher value ones, off the plan ones, that just purely benefit the vendor or the seller and nothing for the buyer whatsoever.
It's just more to the point about you wouldn't know this as a general punter on the road. This is no. But and if everything went wrong, it's the music is stopping, you're noticing real quickly. But if you've got 100%. A good conveyancer on your team that's like, actually, wait a second, this, and this, total BS.
Yeah. And sometimes I try not to stress the clients out. Like, I don't even tell them initially that, hey, there's all these terrible things, and I don't want to freak them out. So usually what I say to them is, yep, I'm just negotiating some amendments, let me get back to you. And they could be horrendous, but I don't want to stress them out at that point, because I'm pretty good at negotiating those things. Steve can probably attest to it. I am really good at negotiating those things. Sometimes I have to be a little bull terrier, but and then once I've got the responses,
you always seem nice when you're talking to you until there's an issue, and then the real Kylie comes out.
No, but it's like sometimes you just get nowhere. You're just hitting a brick wall. But yeah, so I go do my thing first, and then so sometimes the client won't even know I've gone that far and got them that outcome. Like, I'll tell them, obviously, look, there's things there I had to negotiate. Don't worry, thumbs up. We got a great outcome. And I give them all the good news so that I don't need to stress them out unnecessarily, because I always feel the conveyancers, like, and I say that to clients, I feel like we're always the messenger of the bad news. Like, always, like, oh, these conditions are terrible. Oh, that lease is terrible. Oh, you got to change this. No, don't do that. And so we're always giving the bad news, because that's just what we have to do. And so, yeah, I try and make it as stress-free as possible. The biggest thing is finance. So obviously with the 66W, the banks or lenders are not going to give you unconditional before you sign. They want to see a signed contract with a price and your details before they even usually book in a valuation. So when you're signing with the 66W, waiving your right to a call-off, it means you're going in with the hope you're going to get finance. And a lot of clients think a pre-approval that's it. Pre-approvals make or break and we're good. We've got a pre-approval. I get the same wording probably daily, where a client comes to me and says, I want to negotiate on this purchase, and I want to, sign contracts, and the agent's asking for something called a 66W. I don't know what that is, but let's just do it. And I always have to say to them, you do realize, like, you only got pre-approval. Like, that's just, initial interim look at what you're giving the bank or lender, and they're saying, yeah, based off what you've told us, we'll lend you up to $1 million or whatever it might be. Like, that's not unconditional. And I've seen people have pre-approval and not get unconditional later. It happens. So essentially, you're buying a property hoping you're going to get finance later. And so if you sign that contract and that 66W, waive your call off, pay your 10% deposit, and then you don't get finance later, the vendor will terminate the contract and you'll lose at least a 10% deposit. And sometimes they could sue you for other damages, if applicable. So that's probably
if they can't resell it for the same price that you've been contracted at, then legally, are they allowed to actually come after you for the difference?
Yes, they can. If it's more than your 10% deposit, they can. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
And I've seen it happen.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not trying to scare the poop out of anyone, but it's just more of the realities of going into something like this without actually understanding what the potential consequences are. But again, this is the whole point in having an experienced conveyancer in your corner to be like, wait a sec there, mate. Do you know what this is about? And are you sure you should be signing this just yet?
Yeah, I could say probably nearly 100% of clients that we deal with don't know what a 66W means, but because they're so excited about the purchase, they're like, oh yeah, the agent says send that 66W, whatever that is, just send it over. And they don't actually understand what it means. Also, even with things like these days, we're getting more and more agents provide buyers with a pest and build report or a strata report and things like that. Now, from a marketing perspective, that's awesome. And it's great you have it there in case there's an auction and you get a last minute buyer, whatever. But we have to then say to the buyers, you can't rely on that report. You have to get your own. And they don't understand, like, what do you mean? But they've given us a report. Like, why would I get my own? That's another hard conversation, because we're not trying to make the agents look bad and go, no, you're telling porkies and, you're giving them all lies and that report's bullcrap, because it's not about that. Like I always tell clients, I'm not saying anybody's doing anything dodgy or anything's wrong. It's just that it's been ordered on behalf of the vendor. That's the reality. They're selling you the property. They have an opposite interest to you. And even if that inspector just accidentally missed something or whatever the case may be, you might not have any legal recourse against anyone because you didn't engage the inspector, you didn't pay for it, or you paid a minimal $50 fee for a copy. And so you probably won't have any recourse against anyone. So if anything comes up later, it's going to be too bad and it'll be your problem. So just things like this. And again, that pre-approval thing, clients never understand that's not formal approval. It's a daily conversation. Title insurance, yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, you get people that know about it and love it, and you get people that don't. They go, waste of money, another insurance, why bother? So essentially what I tell clients is, years ago when a property was sold, before the electronic world, and when things used to take weeks or if not months to do an exchange, because it used to be by post, it was normal for buyers back then to get a survey report every time, to get a building certificate every time, to do all lists of, you know, different government searches and stuff to try and find out as much as they can about a property, because the contract is not going to give you all the answers, unfortunately. And even due diligence will find out many things, which is great and you need it, but it's not going to give you everything. There's still so much unknown risk when you buy a property, no matter how much due diligence you do, unless you're full going to the extreme to do survey reports, building certificates, every government search, every report, an asbestos report, or, you know, soil testing. Like, nobody is going to go to those lengths. But back in the day, a survey report and a building certificate was the norm once upon a time. And then as things moved, you know, councils got longer processing times, surveyors were not as quick to come out, and the electronic world formed. Buyers no longer order them as the norm. And in most cases, it's impossible. If you've got a, you know, 30-day settlement or a 6-week settlement, you need to get a survey to even apply for a building certificate, and councils these days, it's just not practical. So the title insurance came into play to basically fill that void and say, okay, we know buyers are not going to do every search that they should. So there's always going to be unknown risks that you will not be able to find, unfortunately. And even if you did do surveys and building certificates, there's still unknown risks. So they've come in to fill that void to say, encourage the buyers to take out our insurance, which is a once-off payment at settlement. We cover them for the life they own the property, up to the full value of the property, for important things such as unimproved building works. So obviously, if there was like a granny flat built and it wasn't approved, or a garage converted, or any sort of unapproved building works, if or when council find out and hit you with that beautiful notice to say, you know, on the best day, show cause, and on the worst day, a demolition order, they'll come in and take care of all that and cover all the costs involved. They cover like boundary and survey defects. So if you find later that the neighbour's encroaching on your land, or you're encroaching on theirs, and your land is actually 200 square metres less because no one realised, they cover those sorts of things. They cover planning and title defects, outstanding rates and taxes. They even cover the registration gap, which most people don't even know what that is. So the registration gap is basically from the time you settle to the time your name is on title. There's always going to be a period. That period is shorter since the electronic world, but the period's still there. And there's been times where once it's settled, a caveat's been lodged on title or something, or a writ or a mortgage or a charge. And if that's come on before your transfer has gone through, that takes precedent. With land titles, registration takes precedent. So they cover the registration gap. They even cover like fraud and forgery. If someone ever stole your ID and had the property transferred into their name, which FYI, I actually nearly had this with one of our clients about 7 or 8 years ago, 2 properties that nearly went under his skin. Literally, we saved it by, it was so close. They cover all these sorts of situations, and it's just a once-off payment at settlement. The premium differs depending on the purchase price, and they cover you for the life that you own the property. So if any of these things come up later, whether it's 1 year, 10 years, whatever, you contact the insurer, they jump in, they sort it out, they go chase whoever they need to for money or recovery, but you've got the peace of mind that it's sorted, no stress, no money out of your pocket, done. So we definitely encourage buyers to get it, and we don't get anything out of them getting it. It's not like we get any, you know, trail or anything like that. It's just a really good peace of mind, because again, no matter how much due diligence you do, there is still unknown risks that there's nothing you can do about it. Like, you could do all the searches in the world and it's still not going to protect you 100%.
It's pretty cheap as well. It's like, well, what's the going rate for that now?
So, for example, if you bought, like, let's say a residential property between, say, 1 and 2 million, it's about $1,100-$1,200
for lifetime. That's the
lifetime, yeah. So
lifetime.
It's not something you pay monthly or yearly. It's just once. So if you compare it to any other insurance, it's cheap as chips. because everything else you're paying for your life. No, just once, and you got that peace of mind. And if you're a purchaser buying a property, one question that clients say to me probably daily as well is like, when I say to them, you're going to get a pest and building inspection done, or at least a building inspection. No, it's brand new. Why would I need a building inspection? We see more problems these days with the brand new than the older properties, unfortunately. It's just what's happening at the moment. So we, would go in and ask for the occupation certificate. It's not so much the approval we care about, because if the OC is there, they've got the approval. You could ask for the approval just for the sake of it, but it's the occupation certificate, the home warranty insurance for residential properties. Don't forget that only applies for properties under 4 levels. So for units that are over 4 levels, including underground car parking and stuff, they don't need home warranty insurance, which is very frustrating. But anything under 4 levels or homes, home warranty insurance. Waterproofing is definitely a big one. So generally these days we're starting to ask for waterproofing certificates. We might not have in the past, because the OC usually says everything's good. But because there's so many issues, the OC, an actual private certifier that issues OCs, said to me once when I had to call him, we were acting for a vendor and a purchaser was telling us that there was something non-compliant, but the OC had issued. So I had to call the private certifier and say, this purchaser saying this is not compliant and that you've issued the OC illegally, like what's happened here? He actually said to me, which I was surprised, he said, Kylie, I'm not a plumber. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a builder. I'm a private certifier. The trades submit their documents to me. I tick my boxes that they've given it, and I issue the certificate.
It's funny you mentioned the waterproofing. I've had like 3 of 3 friends who have bought like a high density apartment have all had water issues. Like the one that lives around the corner from me in Queenscliff had literally had water running down their internal wall during storms. Must just be new build, just not designing correctly.
It is. They're just not doing the right thing with a lot of the new builds, probably more so over the last sort of 10 years where there's so many water issues.
Would you buy a dual occupancy property with one unapproved dwelling on site? And I used to see this quite a lot, obviously, when people are living downstairs and it's like the unapproved head height, or they've built a granny flat at the back that's unapproved. What are the risks and ramifications of that?
Yeah, you need to understand the risk and see if that's, 1, your risk tolerance can handle it. 2, you've got the money and time when it does come up to sort it. Because essentially, when you're buying a property with illegal works like that, you have to think of down the track, if and when council find out, it's probably more when rather than if, but it's just a matter of when. They will issue you a notice or order, depending how bad the works are or what the works are. They could give you a show cause to say, tell us why we shouldn't issue a demolition order or an upgrading order. They could issue an upgrading order, meaning that you need to go and do a whole list of works to make it compliant, like fire safety, all that sort of stuff. Or they could straight out issue a demolition order and tell you to absolutely remove it straight away because it's just highly unsafe and they wouldn't approve it in, a lifetime. So that's one aspect, council. But then you've got the next aspect, insurance. So if there's illegal works, insurers are usually not going to insure them. Or they might just insure it initially because they want to take your money, but there'll be fine print to say if they find out later, if there's a fire and there's illegal works there and they're not going to pay out. So you've got that part. And then secondly, even probably more importantly too, that if you're going to rent it out, again, having a tenant in there, if something happens in terms of a fire or flood or something like that, and something serious happens to the tenant, you're going to be personally liable because no insurance company is paying out on that sort of stuff. So you've got a lot to think about, and you need to work out, like I've had a client say to me, I'm happy to take the risk because I'm going to move in and I'm getting a cracker deal. It's 300 grand under value, so I don't care what comes up later. All right, well, if you've looked at all the, what it's going to cost you, what the risks are and what it means for you and you're happy with it, great. But if you haven't and you don't have the money or the means or any way to sort it, if these things come up, then it's probably not good for you. Or take out, if no one knows about it, hasn't been disclosed or anything like that, you can take out the title insurance. So again, it really differs for each individual and their circumstance.
I had a property back in the day where it was a legal head height and I was renting it out. And back then I was like, oh, well, if I get caught, I'll just kick them out. And only now that I'm thousands of acquisitions down, like you said, the insurance is the big one. Like you're thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to lose a rent. No, you could be liable if someone dies, like criminally.
100%. And especially if it's a habitable space, that's worse. Like if it's someone's converted a garage a bit to a little office or a storage, okay, it might be a bit more minor in comparison and easier to fix or easier to remove, and no one's sleeping in there, you know, so it's not a habitable space where the risk is high that if there was a fire or something like that. But if it's a full-blown habitable space like a granny flat or a dual occupancy downstairs converted, like they got the higher risk.